Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my review for the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix. Well, that was quite the Grand Prix, quite the intense finish. Definitely not without its controversy, but there's quite a bit to go through before we get to some of those more controversial moments from today's, or I guess at this point, yesterday's Grand Prix. So start with Piastri on pole, Norris P2, all but Tsunoda starting on the soft tires. Sonoda also off deciding to start from the pit lane. And of course, Stroll had basically withdrawn after the end of qualifying with pain in his wrist. Hopefully, he's feeling better. I think I'll talk about a little bit about Stroll in my power rankings, which I'll probably do later tonight or maybe tomorrow. So a bit of a bad start for Norris. He drops a position to Verstappen. He drops to P3 with Verstappen. A pretty good start. He gets up into second place. Hulkenberg, excellent start. And that would basically really set the tone, really help lead to the great Grand Prix that Hulkenberg would end up having. So when you look at the grid, the running order after that first lap. Basically, you have the top seven all in basically formation with Verstappen splitting the two McLarens. And then the midfield is basically headed by Gasly, Hadjar, and Hulkenberg with Alonso in 11th. And that's basically right from the end of the first lap. In terms of other movers, I would say not particularly a ton, but really that Hulkenberg getting up all those five positions definitely had a big impact on today's race, I should say. So, lap 3, Verstappen starting to put a bit of pressure on Piastri. Lap 7, Leclerc stuck behind Hamilton. Albon pits with a broken front wing. That would not be the first broken front wing for Williams today. Lap 9, pit cycle starts very early. And even though this race has the three hardest Pirelli tire compounds, this was a race I would see quite a few pit stops. Sainz also has a 10-second stop. Definitely did not help matters for him and the other Williams. Lap 12, Norris starting to try to put a little bit of pressure on Verstappen. And lap 13, Norris finally gets past Verstappen up to P2. McLaren 1-2 with Verstappen in third. Verstappen doesn't even really defend the move, which is a bit of a surprise. And again, given what we would see a bit later in the Grand Prix, definitely a bit of a surprise. But it turns out that he would have, a very, very different strategy from the two McLarens and a lot of other cars on track. Alonso then, a bit of a mistake from him. He goes through the gravel trap at turn 13, but he is able to continue. Verstappen pits and comes out in 8th, and seems like cars like Verstappen are doing a 2-stop is what I wrote. Little did I know that everyone was going to be doing 2-stops, and really Verstappen was going to be doing a 3-stop. But like at this point, it was pretty clear that regardless of how many stops it was, Verstappen was basically trying to use his pace that he had in clean air. He knew he probably wasn't going to be able to overtake the McLarens on track, so he was trying to get that result through strategy and through the pit lane. Lap 19, Verstappen passes both Mercedes. Gasly now 8th after the first pit stops. Hulkenberg 9th and Hadjar 10th. So those three drivers all, in their own very, very tight midfield battle. Lap 23, Verstappen takes the lead. Both McLarens pit. Lap 24, Hadjar overtakes Hulkenberg for P9 at turn 1. And I wrote at this point, Verstappen probably has to pit about lap 35 or so. Just given the stunt lengths that others had done, he had basically done soft for his 2 stints. But generally, as fuel load goes down, you can generally, add a couple more laps to your stint. Just because it doesn't put as much wear on the tires with a lighter car. Lawson then overtakes Albon, and this was a bit of another scruffy move for the Williams. I honestly think it was a really clean move by Lawson. I think Albon was just a little bit unfortunate with the placing of his car. Like you can see, Lawson's basically at the edge of the track, doesn't have really anywhere to go, but the end result was that there was contact between the back of Lawson's car, Albon's front wing, and Albon basically damages his second front wing of the race. Alonso also gets past Albon there. Following lap, Hadjar overtakes Gasly for P8 at turn 4. So at this point, Hadjar is basically best of the rest, and Albon basically retires the car in the pits. But before he does that, he goes back out on track to serve a 10-second penalty that was given, I believe, for a different move. With Lawson, but basically for leaving the track and gaining an advantage. I think that one was. So all in all, not a great race for either of the two Williams. I guess luckily on a track that they weren't looking too strong on, which I'm not too surprised given that what Albon has said about the car's characteristics, about how any corner, any really, really long radius corner, corners where you have to, both brake and steer at the same time, those are tracks that Williams apparently really struggle on. And given how many of those kinds of corners there are at Barcelona, not a big surprise they had a bad weekend. So on a weekend where they weren't really on the pace, honestly, if you're going to have a bad weekend, it might be a down weekend for either your drivers or just in terms of end result. It's not bad to have it at one of those, at one of your weaker tracks. Hulkenberg, a really good pace for him in the Sauber. He overtakes Gasly at turn 1. Lap 29, Verstappen starting to lose time to Piastri. So he pits following lap 30. So he basically does 5 laps less than I thought he would. Which I thought, very, very aggressive. But when you do this kind of strategy, as soon as you start losing time, it's the smart thing to do is to pit. So I do understand why you would cut that stint short as soon as you start losing time. But comes in fourth. He has tons of clean air. Basically, he's gotten past both Mercedes and one of the 2 Ferraris as well. Skirmish between turn 1, between Behrman and Lawson. Tire contact there, and Behrman stays ahead. He would eventually get a 10-second penalty for this. I thought it was a little bit harsh, especially given the end result of the Grand Prix and how few laps we had after a safety car. But that would be, I think, something that is a discussion point. I don't know if the FIA will ever change those rules, but it's something that I think I could get behind. Lap 35, Bortoleto overtakes Sainz for P13. Really good move there from him. Lawson finally gets past Behrman for P10 at turn 1. Lap 36, Verstappen overtakes Leclerc for P3 at turn 1. So now he's back up into the podium positions. With Norris at this point, lap 38, closing in on Piastri with about a 2.7-second gap. Piastri basically had a 5-second gap or so until then. Really solid race from him, but at this point, Norris was starting to gain on him. Lap 39, Tsunoda overtakes Ocon for P13. Lap 44, had to mention it, Verstappen laps Tsunoda, and given how many laps there were left at this point, given the time, they were basically lapping in the 120s. That means that at this point, basically, Verstappen was lapping about 2 seconds a lap quicker than Tsunoda, which shows, on one hand, just how strong of a Grand Prix Verstappen was having, but also the struggles that Tsunoda was having in the sister Red Bull. Lap 45, Tsunoda has his 3rd stop of the race. Lap 47, Hamilton slow stop in what was a pretty dismal race for him. Did I not mention the... I did forget to mention that. So, lap 10, we're going to have to go back all the way to lap 10. Lap 10, Hamilton was asked to basically swap positions with Leclerc. And honestly, it was kind of a surprise it was this early in the Grand Prix, but obviously Ferrari could see in the data just how big of a speed differential there was between the 2 drivers. And of course, Leclerc in qualifying basically only did one in Q3 because he wanted more tires at the end. Very, very, what should I say? A lot of foresight there by Leclerc. Probably couldn't have predicted the end that this race would have, but having extra sets of soft tires at the end of this race turned out to be a very, very good thing indeed. So yeah, Hamilton really, really struggling, and to compound matters, he gets a really slow stop. Lap 48, Verstappen pits for soft for his final stop. Norris pits as well, right, and then Piastri follows the following lap. McLarens were basically forced to pit at the same time as Verstappen, because otherwise Verstappen was going to be in the lead if they had left that out, if they had left the 2 McLarens out. Lawson, Behrman, really, really intense battle while being lapped. Verstappen was definitely not happy about basically being caught in the middle of that skirmish. Lap 53, Lawson overtakes Behrman for P11, and then Alonso also gets past Behrman there. In lap 55, this is where your race changes in a big way. So Antonelli, second mechanical retirement in 3 races. He is in the gravel at turn 10, which brings out the safety car. And while in Imola, Antonelli's retirement really helped Verstappen, this time Antonelli's retirement really, really hurts Verstappen. So most cars pit, Verstappen on the hard tires actually. Yeah, so most cars pit. Verstappen is forced to pit for the hard tires, and I think this was a big mistake by Red Bull. Given how few laps he had done on the previous set of soft tires, he'd basically done about 6 laps, 7 laps or so. And given that the safety car would eventually be out for 5 laps, I honestly think that Verstappen should have just stayed out on his used softs. Don't know if it would have given him track position over the 2 McLarens, just because it was the first lap after the safety car, so they're cars were still quite spread out. But nonetheless, Verstappen is basically forced to go on the hard tires, very, very confused. In lap 60, the safety car ends, and this is where all the chaos kicks off. Verstappen basically, on his hard tires, have very low grip. They take a while to get up to temperature. Trying to go out of the final corner, he almost loses the car completely, does basically a massive drift, has to save the car, but basically this is costing him time all the way down the main straight, and he's already lost P3 by the end of the straight as Leclerc passes him honestly pretty easily. A little bit of contact between the two of them, but again, very, very minor contact. Russell then would basically try to make a move as well. Verstappen would end up going into the runoff area. He did the proper runoff procedure, basically went around the 2 bollards, around the exit of, basically come out around the entry of turn 3, and basically after this, Verstappen, Red Bull are not too sure if they have to give the position back. There's been a couple incidents in this race already, Lawson Behrman, Albon, and Lawson, where basically drivers had been penalized for basically, very marginal moves, defending marginal moves, or, overtaking, and then being forced to go into the gravel, or not in the gravel, into the runoff area. So seeing how few laps are left, Red Bull don't want to risk getting a 5-second penalty and, losing like 5 or 6 positions. So basically, they tell Verstappen to give the position back. He's not super happy about this. And so he gives the position back. He attempts to give the position back to Russell in the very, very short straight between turns 3 and turns 4. And really reminiscent of Jeddah 2021. I know that was 4 years ago, so maybe you don't remember. I wouldn't blame you if you don't remember Jeddah 2021. But very similar situation. Verstappen basically is told to give a position back to a Mercedes, and Verstappen, knowing how, he always plays the rules pushes the rules as far as he can go, and he basically allows Russell to get a little bit ahead, going into turn 5, and as soon as he basically allows Russell to be, marginally ahead going into turn 5, he then basically goes full throttle, full acceleration into the corner. And he basically makes contact with Russell at this point. And from Russell, I think from this perspective as well, from what I've read online, it seems like Russell saw what Verstappen was trying to do, and he basically deliberately took a very slow line going into the corner. And this, I think, potentially contributed to Verstappen then careening into him. The two of them make contact. Both Russell very, very shouty on the radio, Verstappen shouty as well. But basically, the end result is that Russell basically gets ahead. Russell's ahead of Verstappen at this point in the P4, and he would end up getting a 10-second penalty for this, as well as 3 points on his penalty on his super license. And now he's only 1 away from an F1 race ban. I think to make matters even worse for Red Bull in this situation is that the stewards came out after the race and said, oh yeah, Verstappen didn't need to give the position back. So very inconsistent from the stewards. They basically set a precedent of sorts with Behrman and Albon earlier in the exact same race, where, drivers had basically gone off, stayed ahead, and they were penalized. So I really understand what Red Bull were doing there. But again, definitely looks like a bit of a oopsie there from the stewards as well. As for Verstappen, again, I don't think, a lot of people are saying he intentionally, deliberately drove into Russell. I don't think he deliberately drove into Russell, but I do think he drove in a very reckless way I think he probably should have known that driving the way he did would have led to a very high probability of contact. I don't think it was 100% deliberate, but he was definitely driving in a reckless way, I would say. And of course, meanwhile, what's going on is that Hulkenberg, who had pitted for a new set of soft tires. So if we go back to looking at our leaderboard, Hulkenberg in 9th place, basically everyone pits for the freshest tires they have. And Hulkenberg is up to 7th at this point. So gotten past, he basically overtaken Hadjar at the restart. Of course, inherited a position from Antonelli retiring, but he also, I think, crazily enough, overtakes Hamilton in the Ferrari. And of course, this is the Ferrari-powered Sauber. Overtakes Hamilton on track into turn 1. Of course, I know Hamilton was on used softs, Hulkenberg on new softs, but still, generally not a great look, I would say, for Hamilton there. And at this point, Hulkenberg is up into 5th place. We get to the checkered flag. Piastri takes the checkered flag, takes his 5th win of the season. Verstappen, with that 10-second penalty, drops down to 10th place, only gets a single point. And this is, I think, very similar to, I would say, Sainz, Australia 2023, Miami in sprint in Australia 2023, and Verstappen in the sprint in Miami, along with Behrman basically losing 5 positions because of his 10-second penalty. I think my feeling about this is that sometimes, obviously, if you have a race and you don't have any safety cars, I think the 10-second penalties, 5-second penalties, I think the current system works very, very well. But when you have a safety car very late in the race, or you have a safety car finish, I think it would be nice if there was some way that those time penalties were either converted into smaller units of time, or they were converted into place penalties. So, for example, a 5-second penalty would be like a just an automatic 1-place penalty. And that way it would have, what would be the representative effect, and it's not, the severity of the penalty is not as affected by whether or not the race ends under a safety car, or if there's a safety car very, very close to the end. I think, for example, the penalty on Verstappen, I think a lot of people are saying it wasn't harsh enough. I can understand if it was a drive-through, but I think given that the race ended, very, very soon after a safety car, I think losing that many positions is probably justified for what Verstappen was doing. So in that respect, I think his 10-second penalty is just fine in that situation. Again, if there had been no safety car, if he just was given a 10-second penalty, like if we look back at the gaps before the safety car, a 10-second penalty, Verstappen would have still been third, and the penalty would have been basically useless. So again, it's one of these complexities that I think it would be nice if the stewards could somehow figure out a way, if the FIA can make rules to adjust for that. But it's not something I'm, holding my breath on, given that these kinds of things are not really, I think, super high priority. So taking a look at your finishing position, your race order, a very, chaotic, controversial 2025 Spanish Grand Prix. Piastri leads McLaren 1-2 ahead of Norris. Leclerc third, a second straight podium. Definitely a bit of a surprise for him, but I thought he performed very, very well. Fourth was Russell, fifth Hulkenberg, sixth Hamilton, seventh Hadjar, eighth Gasly, ninth Alonso, 10th Verstappen. Really happy for Alonso. Finally gets his first point of the season. 11th Lawson, 12th Bortoletto, 13th Tsunoda, 14th Sainz, 15th Colapinto, 16th Ocon, 17th Behrman. Your 2 DNFs are Antonelli and Albon, and your withdrawal is Stroll. Taking a look at your championship standings, Piastri extends his lead to 186. I'm going to get my phone. My phone's not here, so we're going to have to squint at the screen just to read this. Piastri, Norris second, 176, with Verstappen stays in third with 137. Now a very, very far away. He's basically 49 points behind Piastri. At this point, the big talking point was whether the flexi wing rules would basically come and really hurt McLaren, make Red Bull, super dominant again. And I think from the sample size of one race, the answer to that is no. At this point, I think realistically, championship fights can be between the 2 McLarens. This was really, Red Bull's one shot. If pecking order changed dramatically, I think Verstappen could have still been in it. And again, never say never, but, at this point, realistically, I think title's likely going to be between the 2 McLarens. And I think it'll be an interesting fight between, Verstappen and the 2 Mercedes and the 2 Ferraris. Although, realistically, Verstappen, Russell, and Leclerc for that battle for P3 in the Drivers' Championship. So Russell in fourth on 111. Fourth is Leclerc on 94. Sixth is Hamilton on 71. Seventh, Antonelli on 48. Hasn't scored points in 3 races now at this point. Eighth, Albon. Ninth, Hadjar. He moves up a position, sitting on 21 points. Really good race again for him. 10th, Ocon on 20. And 11th is Hulkenberg in your Sauber on 16 points. I would say probably the most opportunistic driver this so far this year. If I were to look at my expected points results, I believe when I did the recalculations this morning, he was basically at positive 1,000%. Like basically, he scored 1,000% of the points I was expected to score based on how good the Sauber is. So yeah, great job by him. And again, really silences any questions about why Audi / Sauber signed him for 2 years. 12th is Stroll, 13th Sainz, 14th Gasly. He moves up a little bit on 11 points now. 15th is Tsunoda, 10 points. Drops to 15th in the constructors, not great for him. 16th is Behrman on 6th, 17th Lawson, 18th was Alonso finally off the mark, and then Bortoletto, Doohan, and Colapinto all on 0 points. In your constructors championship, McLaren extend their lead. What are they on? 362. Ferrari, despite the pretty bad start to the season they've had, they move up to second in the Constructors' Championship on 165 points. Mercedes drop down to third with 159, and Red Bull are in fourth with 144. Races like this, where Verstappen only scores a single point, this is where Red Bull are really wishing that Tsunoda was basically able to score, just a top 5, top 6 result just to score some solid points for the team. 5th is Williams on 54, 6th is Racing Bulls 28, 7th Haas on 26. Sauber, with that result, they move up to 8th on 16, tied with Aston Martin, and then 10th are Alpine on 11 points. Pretty much guaranteed this year. This is probably going to be the most points a last place team has ever scored in the F1 Championship, and I think that's going to even beat out the 2023 Haas, which I think scored 10 or 12 points. I don't remember the exact number. But yeah, there you go. There is your review for the 2025 Spanish Grand Prix. Pretty interesting strategic race between the two McLarens and Verstappen. Of course, safety car completely changed that. Led to a very, very controversial finish I think people will be talking about until the next time, which is a Canadian Grand Prix in 2 weeks. So again, thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.